All right, we're back here. This is Pastor Vinny. I'm here with Pastor Joe. We're pastors at Crossroads Community Church in Framingham, Massachusetts. And last week, Joe was asking me about my calling toward becoming a counselor, which is something that started about 20 years ago for me. And as I've heard Joe preaching and getting to know him, I have a question for him in terms of how God called him to preach and be a pastor, knowing that when he grew up, he was really far from God, and then went into the Marines for a number of years. And so how did
Right.
how did God call you into the ministry?
Well, you could say it was really through some providential relationships in terms of how God sort of drew me to Himself. And one, as I've shared in some of my sermons, my good friend AD was instrumental in that, and also now my wife
Hmm.
Deborah was also instrumental in that. But I think I kind of all go back to a Sunday evening service. As I was at the church I was attending at the time, and it was actually a youth service, and my youth pastor was preaching, and the way I describe it is, all I can say is that I remember sitting there that night, listening to him preach, and just thinking to myself, I want to do what he does. I want to do that. And I was 17 years old when that happened, so I really hadn't been a believer for all that long, maybe just a little over a year. And that's kind of where it started. Is I wanted to preach and I wanted to do what he was doing. And one of the things that I think was somewhat unique is that even at 17 years of age, I knew specifically that I did not want to be a youth pastor. So
Okay.
so I kind of knew from a young age that I
Yeah.
specifically wanted to preach, during the kind of the main service. And so I really
Sure.
didn't have a desire to be a youth pastor, do something
Hmm.
else. I specifically wanted to preach. And but again, as you mentioned, it's not like that was a straight line at all. I mean, as some people like to say, like, so God called you to preach and you decided to join the Marine Corps. Say it sort of reminds people of Jonah. They say
Okay.
he kind of ran in the other direction.
Right.
Um, but again, what happened is, again, another one of those transition points in my life. As I had done 4 years in the Marine Corps, I was getting ready to get out. Those same feelings just came back. The same sense of I know that this is what I'm supposed to do.
Hmm.
And so I remember I took a class. I just took one class. I signed up for an Introduction to New Testament class at Wayland Baptist University. They had an extension campus in Hawaii,
Okay.
and I would listen to the professor lecture, and I must have only been in that class for maybe like 2 or 3 minutes, and I knew specifically, I said, this is what I want to spend the rest of my life doing.
Wow.
I was 22 years old, and said I'm going to spend the rest of my life studying the Bible and teaching the Bible. So that's where that sort of that desire came from. It never left me. And another key factor there is, God has blessed me with a lot of good men in my life. And
Hmm.
so from 17 years of age, one of the pastors on staff, his name was Andre Bailey, he poured into my life. The pastor's son at the church I was at, named Jeff Smith, he poured into my life and said, all these guys just affirmed God's calling in my life, and they sensed, they like, this is what you need to do. You need to preach. And again, by God's grace, when I was in Hawaii, I still remember the pastors' names. Dave Barr was the pastor. He said, "Yeah, you need to do this." An Asian guy named Sean Okamoto said, "Yeah, you need to do this." Rick Stinton, another pastor, they said, "Yeah, this, you need to pursue this." And so, thankfully, I've just had men that have poured into me and have said, we affirm God's call on your life, and this seems like something that you need to do.
Mm.
And so you could look at it as that, providential relationships, and thankfully, that desire has just grown, all throughout Bible college. Again, my professors who now became friends with me said, this is what you need to do. Seminary professors, the same thing. They said, this is, we see this as God's call in your life, that you should be in the church, you should be preaching and teaching and writing. So that's sort of what has been, in my life. That's, providential relationships, men who've poured into me, and my own passion. And so that's kind of what's got me to this point. And I'm thankful for it. I wouldn't want to do anything else. I
Hmm.
love being in ministry and preaching, and of course also, um, you know, meeting with people, watching God work in their lives. That's always, the greatest blessing, I think, is having a front row seat to what God is doing in people's lives is the great joy. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it is from 17 years old to here. And as I have mentioned, yeah, it's always a surprise to me. I never expected that I would be doing this. Certainly people that knew me in my past would have said, no, that's not what we would have pictured Joe, or they would have called me Joey doing.
Yeah.
But God is good, and so here I am.
All right. Thank you for giving
So
us a
yeah,
window into your calling to ministry.
yeah,
So Joe and I try to do this segment every week where we ask each other a question or we both answer a question. So if you have any questions for us personally, or if you have any questions about counseling, or you have any questions about theology or ministry, we welcome you to place those in the comments section on this video, and we'll see if that's something that we can tackle together. So until then, we'll
absolutely.
see you
Yeah.
later. God bless you.